What are the cruelest things Islamic Caliphates did to conquered people? For some Muslims watching this video, it's hard to accept the idea that their faith could be used to justify horrible acts. Yet many of the atrocities committed in the name of Islam were not simply personal perversions, but official policies of Islamic states. Throughout history, Muslim rulers have often been at odds with non-Muslims, whether they be Christians or Jews or Zoroastrians, or even fellow Muslims who disagreed with their interpretation of Islam. Frequently, these rulers saw themselves as instruments of Allah, tasked by God to rule over all. So what were some of the worst things they did to those who differed from them? What are the cruelest things Islamic Caliphates did to conquered peoples? You're about to find out. Welcome to my channel. It's time to explore. Number 10. The Spoils of Yazderd. In 637 AD, the Muslim general Khalid ibn al-Walid defeated the Sassanid king Yazderd III in the Battle of Nahawand. This was a decisive victory for the Muslims and one of the most important battles in early Islamic history. It's considered the point at which Islam became a major world religion. But it wasn't exactly a fair fight. Before the battle, Yazderd sent an envoy to Khalid asking for a truce so that they could negotiate peace terms. But Khalid had no intention of honoring the truce. While pretending to consider the request, he kept the king's messengers overnight as guests of honor, entertaining them with music and wine. And then, when they least expected it, he had them put to death. When Yazderd heard about this, he got angry and led his army into battle the next day. But Khalid was prepared, and his army was victorious. Yazderd fled from the battlefield, but was eventually captured and killed. His head was cut off and hung from the minarets of the mosque at Kufa. His son Peros died in battle, and his daughter Shahrnaz, along with other members of the royal family, were taken captive. According to Muslim sources, Shahrnaz was given to Khalid as a concubine, while other women of the court were given as prizes to the soldiers. The spoils of war included a vast amount of treasure and booty, including precious metals, jewels, and elephant saddles. And Khalid reportedly rode into battle on an elephant wearing a golden saddle taken from Yazdegerd's court. The cruelty shown to Yazdegerd and his family was seen as an example of the fate that awaited anyone who opposed Islam. Number 9. Destruction of the Library of Ctesiphon. In the year 637, the Muslim general Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas led his army to the Sasanian capital of Ctesiphon and laid siege to the city. The library at Ctesiphon was one of the largest and most important in the ancient world, containing hundreds of thousands of manuscripts on a wide variety of subjects. It was home to scholars and scientists from all over the Middle East and Central Asia. But when Sa'd entered the city, he ordered the library to be burned, destroying countless works of scholarship in the process. He also destroyed the city's other great public works, such as its aqueducts and public baths, seeing them as symbols of paganism and luxury. This was part of a larger pattern of behavior among Muslim conquerors who often viewed non-Muslims and their culture with contempt. They looted and destroyed countless works of art and scholarship. And in Baghdad, where the Abbasid Caliphate was located, they built mosques over top of churches and synagogues. Number 8. The Siege of Constantinople. In 674, the Caliphate of Damascus attempted to conquer the city of Constantinople, which at the time was the capital of the Byzantine Empire. The siege lasted for 2 years and ended in a stalemate. But during that time, the Muslims did horrible things to the citizens of Constantinople. They used catapults to hurl burning resin into the city, setting fire to homes and businesses. They also released poisonous snakes into the city through holes dug under the walls. And when the siege was finally lifted, they left behind a plague that killed thousands of people. The siege of Constantinople was one of the first major attempts by the Muslims to conquer a Christian city, and it showed just how determined they were to spread Islam by force. Number 7. The treatment of Christians in Muslim-ruled territories. Throughout much of Islamic history, Christians living in Muslim-ruled territories were second-class citizens. They were often forced to pay higher taxes than Muslims, and were banned from owning property or traveling without permission. They were also forbidden from building new churches, and were sometimes persecuted for practicing their religion openly. In some cases, Christian men were forced to convert to Islam or circumcise their sons, while Christian women were often taken as concubines or sold into slavery. Despite these pressures, however, many Christians refused to abandon their faith. They were willing to suffer persecution rather than renounce Jesus Christ. Number 6, the Crusades. The Crusades were a series of religious wars sanctioned by the Latin Church in the medieval period. They took place between the 11th and 13th centuries and involved European Christians fighting against Muslims in the Middle East. The First Crusade resulted in the establishment of several Crusader states in the Levant, but these states were constantly under threat from Muslim forces. By the end of the 12th century, only one Crusader state, the County of Tripoli, remained. But the Muslims did not tolerate the presence of infidels in their midst, and when they recaptured Jerusalem in 1187, they massacred the Jewish and Christian inhabitants. Saladin, a Muslim leader who recaptured Jerusalem, was seen as a hero by many Muslims and a villain by many Christians. But he actually followed the rules of Islamic law by giving the non-Muslims a choice between conversion, paying a special tax, or death. Number 5, Mongol invasions of the Middle East. In the 13th century, the Mongols invaded the Middle East and slaughtered millions of people. They were ruthless and efficient killers, and they didn't care who they killed. They attacked Muslim and Christian alike. But the Mongols were not motivated by religious zeal. They were simply looking to expand their empire and acquire more land and resources. One of the most famous Mongol leaders was Hulagu Khan, grandson of Genghis Khan and founder of the Ilkhanate. He conquered much of the Middle East, including the important cities of Baghdad and Damascus. But his invasion of the Middle East was not unprovoked. It was actually in response to attacks by the Khwarezmians on Mongol trading posts. And although the Mongols were brutal conquerors, they were also tolerant of other religions. Number 4, the Black Death. The Black Death was a devastating outbreak of bubonic plague that occurred in Asia and Europe in the mid-14th century. It is estimated that the plague killed around 25 million people in Asia and 15 million people in Europe, making it one of the deadliest natural selection events in human history. But some historians argue that the Black Death may have actually been brought to Europe intentionally by the Muslims as a form of biological warfare. At the time, the Muslims were fighting a war with the Christian kingdom of Hungary, and they may have thought that they could win the war by spreading disease among the enemy. There is some evidence to support this theory, but it's hotly debated and there's no consensus among historians. Number 3, the sack of Rome. In 1527, a group of 20,000 German mercenaries, known as the Schmalkalden troops, sacked the city of Rome. The sack of Rome was one of the most brutal and destructive episodes in the city's long history. The soldiers went on a rampage, looting and pillaging throughout the city. They murdered thousands of people and defiled some of the holiest sites in Christianity. But the soldiers weren't the only ones responsible for the destruction of Rome. Their commander, George von Frundsberg, was a mercenary captain who had been hired by Pope Clement VII to put down a revolt in Rome. But once von Frundsberg realized how much money the soldiers could make by looting the city, he gave the order to attack. Although the soldiers were not officially sanctioned by the Pope to attack the city, the Pope did try to cover up the extent of the damage done to Rome. He commissioned a report that greatly understated the number of people killed and the amount of property stolen. Number 2, the Ottoman conquest of Constantinople. The Ottomans were a Turkish people who came to dominate the Eastern, Mediterranean, and the Middle East. They established an empire that lasted for over 600 years, and they controlled important cities such as Istanbul, Jerusalem, and Mecca. But the Ottomans were also responsible for some of the worst atrocities committed in the name of Islam. In 1453, the Ottomans conquered the city of Constantinople, which was then the capital of the Byzantine Empire. The conquest of Constantinople was a major turning point in history. It marked the end of the Byzantine Empire and the beginning of the Ottoman Empire. It also symbolized the decline of the West and the rise of the East. But the Ottoman army's treatment of the city's defenders was brutal. The Ottomans bombarded the city for weeks before finally breaching the walls and entering the city. Once inside, they went on a rampage, killing or enslaving everyone they met. Churches were destroyed, and countless works of art and scholarship were lost. Number 1. The Bosnian Genocide. The Bosnian Genocide was the worst atrocity committed in the former Yugoslavia. It took place during the Bosnian War in the 1990s when Bosnian Serb forces systematically murdered thousands of Bosnian Muslims and Croats. The goal was to create a greater Serbia by removing all non-Serbs from Bosnia. The killings were carried out by paramilitary units and regular army troops, and they included men, women, and children. Serbian soldiers raped thousands of Muslim women and then killed them. They also burned villages, destroyed mosques, and desecrated Muslim graves. The international community was slow to respond to the genocide, and by the time the war was over, thousands of people had been killed. Thank you for watching. If you liked the video, please share it with your friends. See you in the next video.